Welcome to the Time to Practice podcast and our summer of music practice tips. Whether it's currently summer where you are when you listen to this episode, I hope you find these short episodes full of great ideas, reminders, and practical strategies you can use in your practice in the coming weeks. If you've never listened to the podcast before, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. My name is Christine Goodner. I'm a music educator, author, and podcaster who has made it my mission to talk about music practice to support music educators and families looking to make home practice more effective and to help them reduce conflict and frustration in the practice room. While we're currently in our summer of practice tips, throughout the school year, our episodes include interviews and informational podcasts with expert advice, current research, and information to help music educators and parents and caregivers support music practice for young musicians. We have over 80 episodes in our archives, so please subscribe and feel free to go back through and listen to past episodes this summer, along with our short episodes full of practice tips. I'm glad you found us, and I'm really thankful for everyone who's part of the listening community of the Time to Practice podcast. I am currently taking requests for virtual parent and teacher talks for the 2025 and 2026 school year. I give talks on setting up for a successful school year, reducing conflict in the practice room, book club talks, and talks where families can submit their practice questions, and I incorporate them into our time together. So please reach out if you'd like to set something up for the coming school year before my schedule fills up. I can't wait to plan something that meets your program's needs. Welcome back, everyone. I'm excited today to be touching base after a fantastic week at the Oregon Suzuki Institute. And for our summer of practice tips, I thought I would share a few takeaways that I got after spending the week teaching Suzuki early childhood classes, a parent workshop where I got to work with the same group of parents for an hour every day through the week of Institute, which was fantastic, and giving a few talks to parents and teachers and getting a lot of feedback afterwards. And I also got to observe some classes, including my own student in some classes, which was super rewarding for me. So I thought I would put together a few thoughts that I had to share about music practice after that experience and after reflecting on a lot of conversations with teachers and parents over the course of the week. And the first one is related to motivation, a topic we talk about a lot here on this podcast. Motivation can get a huge boost from the environment that we are immersed in. It really gets driven home to me when I'm in any kind of music camp experience, whether it's a Suzuki Institute or orchestra camp or a sleepaway camp, whatever your child's participating in, or you as a teacher are sending your students to. I think remembering that those environments can be super motivating. Our child might be motivated by a lot of different factors. So from one child to another, and one teacher from another, different things might motivate us about that, like being really social along with our music, being a part of something much bigger than ourselves and even much bigger than our home studios that we work in. The certain kinds of music we get to play and make with others. And also the sense of accomplishment that we can get from making progress, especially from an intensive music program where you can see an explosion of growth over the course of, a week or 2 weeks. And there's many other factors that might motivate your child or your music students that are there. But I think because there's a lot of opportunities for a lot of different experiences in these camp situations, a lot of students will come away feeling really motivated and inspired for the year ahead. So I think that's what makes events like this so motivating and worth doing, worth making the sacrifices to go if we can. And I think, some of the things that happen at a music camp or institute are hard to replicate at home. But if you can sort of notice what you observe or theorize might be part of what motivated your child about that experience, there might be little pieces of that we could look for at home in our own day-to-day life during the school year that we could put in our child's environment to help them be motivated. I think it's always a good reminder for me, even though I talk about it all the time, to just see how situations we're in can light that fire of motivation. And one of our roles as teachers, parents, family members supporting young musicians can sometimes be, we can't control whether a child's motivated, but can we put them in environments where motivation is likely to be sparked? So that was one of my huge takeaways, is just that importance. And sometimes we work really hard or really pull out our hair trying to find ways to motivate. And it could just be like, what environment would help our child be motivated, rather than I have to force that or create that somehow myself as the grown up. So another takeaway I really was reminded of this past week was sometimes there's a concept we have heard over and over. Maybe our parent and caregiver have said it to us over and over, or maybe our home teacher has said it to us over and over. But hearing someone new in a new situation say the same concept in their own individual way, or we are just receptive to it or developmentally ready to take it in when it gets said to us, can be really, really powerful. And I think this is an argument for getting into situations where we work with a new teacher in a masterclass setting, for example, or go to a music camp, is maybe a concept that we've been wrestling with or just hasn't clicked for us or hasn't felt motivating to work on. When said to us in a new way, can really get us interested in taking a leap forward in our technique or playing something about our music that we really need to get to the next level. That's a really wonderful advantage of getting to be in situations like this and surrounded by different teachers than we would get to work with at home. Another takeaway I had, which was related to the first one in a way, but the combination of social time and having fun plus making music at a high level with others can bring so much joy and so much enjoyment to making music that I think looking for ways that we can get our students and our children involved in these situations beyond the music camp week or the Suzuki Institute week is really, really worthwhile. And I think sometimes that is the fuel that keeps us going when we're having a lull in motivation or I really like to play, but I don't like to practice, which is something I hear all the time and that I heard parents say to me last week when they were talking about struggles at home with practice. I think remembering that having a fun social experience along with making music is sometimes the spark that makes people say like, "Oh, I really want to do this," or "This is really worth putting in the work." So I encourage us all to look for some ways to think about, how do we get our children to these experiences next summer, for example, if it was hard to get there this year? And also, what could we do during the school year that could get our child interacting in social ways with other kids making music? I think that's so, so powerful. I was reminded of that all over again on my Institute week. And then another takeaway I had, because I had a lot of conversations about making home practice for grown-ups who are involved in their child's home practice sessions and are being asked to help with some kind of task going on in practice, but there's some stress involved. Often that centers around feedback, giving our child feedback that the teacher is asking us to help with, but that our child is not very interested in receiving or very motivated in hearing from us. And how do we navigate that relationship? So, the big tip I'll give away if you are listening that I think really, really helps and is my first go to is to work on sharing nonverbal feedback. Sometimes our child can really benefit from a grown up being in the practice session, helping them do the task their teacher has asked of them, which might take a lot of mental focus or a lot of striving towards an ideal. And they will get there so much more easily, quickly, with our help and with our support. But getting them to be willing to accept that can be a challenge. And the nonverbal feedback can be a really great way for students who do not want to be audibly interrupted while playing. That can be really distracting to a student, even though we as the grown up are really trying to help and have very good intentions. Or maybe the teacher interrupts and reminds the student, our child, of that in the lesson and it goes fine. But then when we do it at home, it does not work well. And so I think erring on the side of nonverbal feedback. If you want your child to curl their pinky, maybe you could have a conversation. Do you want me to gently tap your pinky? I would say very gently, grown-ups and parents listening. Or do you want me to wiggle my own pinky so you can see it? How are we going to work out a signal so I don't audibly interrupt you? I think respecting that could really throw off our child helps the practice relationship a lot. And then another thing is some students really feel averse to being touched physically, even if it's super, super gentle when they're in the middle of playing. Maybe it just throws off their concentration or sort of startles them or just they just don't like the feeling of that. And then again, I think we can respect what they could use to take in their feedback and find a nonverbal way to communicate that. I've had students before, for example, draw their own sign about whatever thing it is that I'm asking them to work on. So let's use that pinky example again, like curl the pinky. Maybe the student draws a picture of their hand and then the parent or grown up helping in practice holds up the sign and then it gives the student a reminder without throwing off their ability to keep going. So if you're not a parent or grown up who practices with your child in the practice room, this may not apply to you. But for those of you who do, this is the number one piece of advice I found myself giving out last week for a variety of situations when there was feedback involved. Trying the nonverbal feedback typically with students I work with in my studio is really, really helpful and really takes a lot of stress out of the practice. So I would love to give you that piece of advice to take with you, as it was really reinforced for me last week. And then I will just end this short episode by sharing that I know that sending your child to a Suzuki Institute or another music camp can be a really big time and financial commitment. It can feel really hard to imagine how we can make that work for some of us in our budgets. I have been there myself with my own kids when my kids were young. And what I would say is start now. If you have a full calendar year, 12 months until this event is in your community for your child, you could start planning now to think of some creative ideas in order to get your child there. And I wanted to share a few examples of how I have helped students raise funds to get to Institute in the past. For any music camp, this ideas could work. You could do if you live in a state where there's a bottle deposit, and you could do a pop can drive or a bottle drive and ask friends and family to help you collect cans and bottles that could be returned for, a small amount of money per can. If you're doing that all year long or multiple times in the year, that can really add up and help take a chunk out of tuition. Another great thing that could be done studio wide if you have a music program or studio, or that a family could choose to do just individually for your family, is a practice-a-thon. And you could ask family and friends, could you sponsor my child per minute to practice over a certain period of time? And maybe let people know what is the typical amount of time your child practices in a given day or week, so they know what they're getting into. But that can be a really great way for our community to support our child. It also feeds the preparation for the camp. The child feels like they've had some ownership in earning their way. That can be a really great one. So I would encourage you to try that if you are looking for some ideas. In our local community where I live here in Oregon, in the past, I've had students team up with a local business, like C's Candy, for example, would have students be able to sign up, even though they're not a nonprofit themselves, for a fundraiser where they purchase candy and then purchase it at a reduced rate because it's for a fundraiser, and then they sell it and can keep the difference in the cost for fundraisers. That has worked well. So in your local community, there could be organizations that let you do that just on a one-on-one basis for your family, which I think is good to know about, and know there's ways to get our children involved depending on their age. Where I live, it's okay to go busking or play at the local farmers market and put out your case with a little sign saying, I'm raising funds for music camp. Check the laws and ordinances where you live, but that can also be a great way for people beyond family and friends, just the public, to see a student working hard, showing what they do with their instrument, and feel like they can help contribute. I know I definitely support when I see students doing that in public in my area. That's another idea for you. Might take a little bit of planning ahead and thought, but again, if you are thinking for the following summer from where you are now, or the following camp, plan out how many months you have. You have some time to get organized, and maybe talk to some students and families in your program that might want to team up who are also going, and it can be less work to coordinate some of those things together. So a couple other quick ideas are to research when are scholarship deadlines for the camp that you are attending. If a lot of camps will have a opportunity for people to get scholarships, but there might be a pretty early in the year deadline for that. So if you find that information out and know what to look for and when, that can help you take advantage of those opportunities should you qualify. And the other thing is just simply budgeting. If we have 12 months to save up for next year's camp, and we kind of figure out what did it cost this year, so I have a rough estimate, could I set a little bit aside each month? And that could make it feel less of a big hit when it's time to pay that tuition bill. So I did want to acknowledge that simply writing a check to attend camp can be challenging because they are not cheap, but it's partly because there's fabulous faculty and buildings and places that people are renting to put on these camps, and a lot goes into them. Many of them are operating on a shoestring and hoping to break even every year. And I think we can just think about how we can all work together to support keeping arts organizations going with these camp opportunities for students, and also what creative ways could we as students and families of students find to get our children there. So those are a few of my thoughts. Think about motivation. What does your child love about attending an experience like this? If you just have gone to a camp, or you will this summer, and there's sort of this high of motivation that happens, and then we get home in our normal routine and that sort of dissipates. But it could be a great time to reflect, like, what was it for my particular child that made that so exciting, and could we get a little taste of that other times in the year, get involved in some things in our community? And can we take advantage of opportunities in our studio if there's a master class or a workshop opportunity, so that our child can hear something from someone else's perspective? Is there a way to get our child in social situations with their music? And if we are in the practice space with our child, can we give some nonverbal feedback, especially if we notice that it's not being received very well when we try to audibly or physically gently correct what they're doing? Thinking outside the box and looking for other ways to give that feedback can go really far. So, a few of my thoughts from a very inspiring week that I had in Oregon here. I know the Institute here has said they would love to do that parent workshop that again next year that I got to help lead. And I'm really would love any of you who are listening who would like to be a part of that to look for registration at the Oregon Suzuki Institute next year and come join me. I'd love to have you in my class and talk to you about your own particular practice ups and downs and how we can go into the year in a successful, motivated way. I am going to also share exciting news that's starting next week. There's going to be a 5-week series on the podcast with my fabulous friend and colleague, Claire Allen, who is a frequent writer, violinist.com. We presented a session together at the American String Teachers Association conference last spring about supporting perfectionists in the private studio. And we found the topic so fascinating, so personally relatable, and so interesting. We had so much research and felt sort of confined by 45 minutes. And also realized that a lot of people were not going to be in that room hearing us talk about this topic. And so we are going to bring this topic to you over a series of podcasts exploring different aspects of perfectionist thinking. And I think if your child has all or nothing thinking or tends to get very frustrated if they make mistakes, or you feel very frustrated if your child is making mistakes, all of these things are going to be discussed and some further resources shared with you over the next 5 weeks of the podcast. So I cannot wait to have Claire on and to share all those episodes with you. So for this week, maybe notice what you find your child is really motivated by. If you are looking for more ideas about that, I would be happy to share more in the future. There's a great past episode by one of our guests, Ruth Meintz. She has a great book on motivation. I will put a link to that interview in the show notes if you want to listen to our conversation about motivation. And I wish you over the next week some happy practicing, some good motivation, and I will look forward to seeing you here next week. Take good care, everybody.